Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Meltwater Finals, a tournament with the strangest format imaginable that doesn't make any sense whatsoever, but I continue covering because you asked me to in the YouTube comments section. Today, we have a lot of exciting matchups, and the storyline is the fact that in the Blitz portion of their match, Magnus Carlsen went for a crazy queen sacrifice against Anish Giri, and it led to a wild game. So that game is going to come last on our list. You are not going to click the timestamp and skip ahead to it, because every time you click the timestamp stamp to go ahead to the Magnus game, a puppy gets kicked somewhere in the world. So, listen, don't trust me, trust the scientists. With that said, we are going to get into the games today. A lot of fun, and hopefully no puppies will need to be kicked. Now, first game, Aronian Duda, pawn to e4, pawn to e6, the French defense. We have an Armenian, soon turned American. He will be playing for the United States, at some point moving there as well, versus a gentleman from Poland, but we have, a date in France. We have d4, d5, knight to c3. This is known as the classical variation of the French defense. And if black is going to play de4, it doesn't really matter where you put your knight, just like in the Caro-Kann. But here, black has a choice between knight f6, bishop b4, and hitting themselves in the face with a rock, because nothing else is really that appealing. So this is a Wiener, c5, a3. Here there is actually a variation for black known as the Armenian, to go bishop to a5, or according to chess.com, the retreat variation. But yeah, no, that's not the retreat. Bishop c3 takes knight e7. Now, the general plans of the Wiener are that white plays queen to g4 to utilize this pawn structure in the center, which is kind of preventing black from natural development, goes for g7, and sometimes takes both pawns. Actually, you're going to see that right now. This is actually very common. It's a super sharp, aggressive line that, as my coach likes to say, I wouldn't touch with a 10-foot pole. Or that's what your dates say about you after they see you. I don't know. I'm just relaying the facts as I know them. What black likes to do here is go for counterplay after c takes d4 and this kind of queen lining up on the pawns in the middle and also on the queen side. c d4 is very common, but there's a move here for white that holds everything together, and it's knight to e2. Now the queen cannot take the pawn on c3 with check, the queen cannot take the pawn on e5 with check, and you're actually threatening in many cases to recapture because the queen c3 is no longer available, and the pawn behind it is actually guarded by your queen over here. And if anyone's wondering why this rook is not being taken, don't be afraid to admit it. That's okay. I also was 300 rated some time ago, and the knight is protecting it. So, knight to e2, knight to c6, and now we have f4. The center is now going to be held together, but black is going to play dc3. I'm not going to lie to you. I have not seen a mainline Wiener at 2700 level in years. So, this is cool. I really hope that from this point forward, they have a crazy theoretical discussion. Someone introduces a novelty, a fascinating game comes, a complex middle game into a complex end game. Black castles long, white pushes the h-pawn. That's usually part of the strategy. All right, queen to d3. Black plays d4 here. This is everything I've seen before. Basically, white has a choice here. White can take on d4, but actually white likes to use this as a shield, and in many cases just start throwing this pawn as fast as possible down the board, so black needs to deflect his forces in order to meet it. Knight takes d4 is downplayed by Levon, takes, bishop d7, and actually, as far as I remember, this is not theory, but now we just have a game of chess. So queen d6, obviously if you're up some material, you want to trade a little bit of the queens. No queen trade for Duda, he likes his lady. Queen to b4, now, I don't know, if Duda goes queen c7 here, maybe they just repeat, I have no idea. But he goes queen d5, and so Levon's like, I'm going to play this move, a4. This move basically has two ideas. Number one is maybe bishop b5. Maybe bishop b5, trade the bishop, open up my rook. Although that does weaken g2, I need to be a little careful. Idea number two is bishop to a3, and potentially creating a checkmate threat on e7. Now, black plays knight f5. So at this point, Aronian probably was like, well, bishop a3 makes a little bit less sense now because that's not mate, but how else do I develop, right? I mean, if I take on c3, I'm opening up the rook. It feels like all of black's pieces are very active, but maybe I can go bishop a3, and then bishop d3, and then take the knight, and then here. And so we spent 5 minutes and 43 seconds calculating here and played this move, and he got mated in one. There's no punchline. That's what happened. I'm not kidding. I know sometimes I make jokes. That's what happened. I think Levon here just had a moment, like when the aristocracy realizes they're human, just like the the poorer class. Like that's what happened. His bodyguards took him to the downtown village where everyone's sleeping outside, and they just let him walk around. And he's like, wow, it's a lot worse here than it is in the castle. I'm gonna help the people. So this was his way of giving back to the people, although he went on to draw the next 3 rapid games and promptly lost the match. I don't know if it was a mouse slip. The engine here gives rook a3 as a possibility. Like maybe he clicked the piece and then the square and he accidentally had the wrong click on the wrong piece. I don't know. All I know is this is actually kind of why you don't take on d4 in the Wiener. Like you need to develop faster than this. Also, Wiener is a crazy line to play with black. By all means, go ahead and play it. Anyway, that's the first game of the day, so you know it's going to be a fun recap. On that note, I'd like to show you this game between Vladislav Artemiev and Maxime Vachier-Lagrave, because the truth is that sometimes when you have like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you forget like somewhere in the middle, right? You'll remember the things at the end. This was maybe the most boring game, just from the standpoint of technicality. This was a very high-level match, but the 3 decisive games all took about 70 moves, so they really like their endgames, but I don't want to disrespect them. So here's what we're going to do. It's a Dutch defense by a guy from France, and then it's a double fianchetto, okay? A5. So this is a little bit of a wild way to play, to try to play a4, damage the structure, flank pawn attack, very common. C4, a4, now we have a little pawn dance. C4, a4, b4, and now we have d6, d4. So MVL's pawn has made it among the ranks of these pieces, although it kind of doesn't really do much. But if knight to c3 is ever played, like this, black is always going to play a3, and just kind of, this is a very inconvenient thing for white. And if white ever plays the move a3, then the pawn just lives, and maybe b3 is a little bit weak. So you really don't want to give your opponent the satisfaction of playing this move, although it's actually completely fine. Anyway, d4 and d5, very common idea. What is white trying to control with this square? e6. With this move, e6 square. What is he trying to do? Move the knight to where the pawn was and jump into e6. Very common idea against the Dutch defense, and the general rule of thumb is once you see d5, you should play e5. Now, here it got a little bit delayed, but white is already borderline strategically winning. This is blocked by the queen side, and c5 is coming. Now, yes, you can take en passant, which is exactly what he does, and he plays knight d4 and all this. At some point, all Dutch positions are basically on the verge of collapse. This is coming from someone who has played hundreds of games of the Leningrad Dutch in his life, although maybe slightly of a lower quality than MVL, but like not that much, because the truth is, even though he's a lot stronger than me, this opening sucks. And y'all keep making me make courses. You're like, make a Dutch course. I'm like, why? If I want to sell you garbage, I'll sell you my bathwater, all right? Like, no. I'm going to try to focus on quality openings. Knight db5, and black is lost after 15 moves. But there's still enough pieces on the board and decisions that have to be made for white to actually convert the advantage. Queen d3. Queen d3 stops any incoming knight jump, which is basically black's only source of counterplay, although it's actually still black's only move. Takes on g7, king g7, rook d1. I mean, white's position literally could not be better. And here, it would have been quickly executed with the move f3. You see, f3, if the knight just simply goes back to f6, allows a capture on c7, which attacks a rook, and then d6 might fall, and then, yeah, you just storm right through the castle. Maybe what Artemiev didn't like was that black can immediately strike back, although there is really not much of a concern there. You have a monster bishop. Every pawn in black's camp is going to fall. I don't know why he didn't play f3. Maybe Artemiev watches a lot of Feingold content. I don't know. I haven't asked him. Queen e3, queen d8, c5, d5. You see what black is doing here? This looks really smart. Black has glued the knight in the middle. Black is dead lost. Like, dead lost. It's just not a good opening. It's just not, I don't know. It's just not good. I'm like, yeah, c6, look at him. He's just shoving it forward into his face. I mean, a4 is, what is this even? The pawn's done nothing. c7 under pressure, d5. This game says less about MVL and more about choice of opening. It's just, I'm telling you, the Leningrad Dutch is a really hard opening to play. It really is. It really is. And again, I've like almost never had success with it. I just played it because I was lazy. Rook c7, bishop d7, queen d4. Okay. Artemiev is a clean pawn up with an absolutely dominant grasp of the position. However, he's playing Maxime Vachier-Lagrave, who's actually quite notorious for creating counterplay out of nowhere, playing extremely fast, making you doubt everything, and then losing. He's really resourceful. So rook b8, rook a7, king g8. stepping out over here. It's +5 or something. Knight c7, rook f7. And now Artemiev decides, bishop takes knight. My bishop is better than the knight, but I have a way to simplify this position. There's no really good way for black to take because this falls. And if knight takes, this falls. So you got to go like this, and now my queen's open, right? So knight d5. Now we have bishop to e8. Takes, push pawn. But that's actually not as good. Believe it or not, this liquidation, which also helped black structure, it looks like it's supposed to be really good. a4 is going to fall. You'll go here. You'll use your a-pawn. White could have done a little bit better, but Artemiev is a Russian guy. He sees better endgame, probably winning endgame. He's going to go for slightly better endgame, probably winning endgame. They trade pawns, and they trade knight for bishop. And now we have king g2, king f1, and MVL beelines for a trade of rooks because, you know, as he thinks that this endgame is holdable. And it very well might be, actually. This endgame might very well be holdable. What's going to come down to is how fast this king gets out and how overextended black's pawns are. If the king was on g5 hanging out with the pawns, maybe it's an endgame that's like possible to win, right? But e3, first we stabilize, h3, h5, it's all going to come down to the pawns. The engine here, if you let it run on a low depth, thinks that this move gives away the endgame. It thinks that if black just hung out and did nothing, for now it's holding. If I let it think for longer, it might decide that the endgame is just losing. But this is what I mean, like one pawn move. How is that pawn move losing? If you're low rated, you're watching this like... Actually, if you're low rated, you're watching this like... I don't understand how this... Don't worry, I'm 2700 blitz. I also pick my nose, just our little secret. G4, H... Who doesn't, by the way? Let's not pretend like we're all, you know... Anyway... G5, king f7, check here. Here's the problem. Your king is cut off on the back rank. Your h-pawn is split from your g6 pawn. But still a little tricky to win. How's white going to get his king out? Turns out that g5 was for... that after h5, h4 was the winning move. Freezing the structure like this, bringing up the rook and the pawn, and running the king. So that's apparently what was winning. This little pawn dance ended up being equal. And MVL plays f4. See, if MVL just sits, here's what's going to happen. King is going to walk, and king is going to walk, and pawn is going to walk. So he tries to sacrifice a pawn and get some activity, but Artemiev is just too sharp. He forces the pawn to stand here, and now MVL gives up the f-pawn for an f-pawn and goes here, but this is lost. It's lost because, watch. The king walks up, defends the pawn, and now... If you don't do anything, I move my rook and I push, and it really helps this king is cut off on the back rank and can't get active. Very important for endgames. And if you let the king back, the king is either going to go this way or to the back rank. And Artemiev finds a way to rejoin the king with the pawn. And I had an endgame very similar against I Hate Rook A4, my anonymous training partner. So if you watch that video and this video, leave a comment telling me you support as much of the content as you can. I appreciate you. Artemiev wins, and he wins the match. He won 2 of the 3 decisive games. And, okay, maybe this wasn't as boring after all, but I would just warn you that this was a long and technical endgame. Next game I'd like to show you, Wesley So versus Timur Radjabov. Wesley needs to win. He's down 2-1. He needs to win this game. He has the white pieces. He plays e4. If you're playing with black and you need to not lose, if you're playing with black and you're 2700, what do you play? Shocking versus e4, right? Unless you're Magnus. He likes the Sicilian. So we have Italian. And here, listen, Wesley needs a pep talk, because if you got to win with white, look, there's literally nothing better. Or the Gotham Gambits course, link is in the description, you can go for d4. You know, you can play these early d4 lines. Like, for example, here, d4, bishop d4, knight d4, knight d4, bishop g5. Very aggressive f4 stuff here. Crazy, crazy stuff here. You know, get the course. H6, there's some crazy, like, pawn sacrifice lines, bishop h4. I mean, oh my god, it's crazy lines here. Like, I think this is one of my favorite variations ever, this f4 move. Yeah, sacking the bishop. It's in the Gotham Gambits course. Link is in the description. Random ad in the middle of your video that you can't skip because it's me. All right, and anyway, we have Joko, whatever this is, d3, bishop g5. In this game, Radjabov performs witchcraft beginning from this move. So this queenside stuff is very common nowadays, a5, c3, b4, b5. Yeah, here Radjabov just decides that he invents his own laws of chess, proceeds to play the move knight to h7. All right, his king gives his horse a kiss on the cheek and then blesses it to just go out into battle. Just go. And then when the knight retreats, like, all right, me too. Okay, knight d5. Now his bishop goes to that square. I mean, what is he doing? What, you want me to explain this to a 700? I don't know what the hell is going on. I don't know. At least he's not hanging mate in 1 after 5 minutes. I don't know. I don't know what bishop g5 is. I can't possibly explain it. I really don't know. I think he's trying to win control over the f4 square. Maybe in the future trade this bishop for this knight. Like, if I don't know. I really don't know. So he then does this and just gives up the bishop. So clearly he has some idea. Clearly he has some idea. The bishop is on this diagonal. It's ready to be given up for the knight. And it kind of becomes a little bit more obvious once h4 happens. He's like, I really don't care, like, if you take on g5, because I might just do this and put my knight on f4. In many ways, his strategy makes a lot of sense. It just looks so abstract. But, you know, it's like when you're at a museum and you stare at something and you're like, I don't know why that thing is interesting to these 20 people who are standing there dissecting the background of the art. That's how I feel at museums. Because I'm a moron, but, you know, I still feel like that. So h4, and now we have this and another trade, and d4. And here Radjabov can play a lot of normal-looking moves, like attacking the center. But instead he plays g5. The Dudas did not lose, so he's playing for the win. Maybe he, like, didn't care if he lost, because then they would play blitz with Wesley, spend more time with his friend. I don't know, maybe it's something wholesome. But the next few moves are not wholesome. Wesley sacrifices the h-pawn to damage Timur's structure. Maybe he's going to be a pawn down, but get out of there and be better in the endgame. It's a pretty logical decision. Rook e1, king h8, e5, let me attack down the middle. Timur's like, bro, you could attack down the whole middle. You could blow up that whole side of the board. Queen to g5, I don't care. I'm sidestepping with the king. I'm going to slide on over with the rook. It's mate. It's mate, Wesley. You're my friend, but there ain't no friends in the Meltwater finals. Knight f3, queen g4, ed, h3. Go ahead, take everything. Go all the way. Make a queen. I don't care. h3. All right, you're bringing it back. Okay, you're using the bishop as a shield. Sorry, using the pawn as a shield. Knight to g5. Why is that move good? Like, for example, if knight takes g5, here's why it's good. What? Where's the attack? Check. Now, if you go king f3 here, you're bold, but you get mated. And it's going to be violent. You go here, it's mate in 1. Okay, so that's not good. So, yeah, I mean, it's just bad. It's all dead. So Wesley plays this move to try to get his queen out with a check. And Timur just brings his queen back, and Wesley so resigns. Wild game. Wild game. I did not know e4, e5 games could be like that. This dude went knight h7, knight g5, knight e6, bishop g5, knight back to e7, didn't move 2 of his pieces, and still won the game. I mean, again, I always like to say this, when they do it, oh wow, so clever, such creative, much wow. When you do it, it's like, yo, who taught you the basics? Tell me all the YouTube people you watch. Eric Rose? Oh, well, yeah, that kind of makes sense. Just kidding, Eric, I love you. Anytime I make, like, jokes like that, even though the dude slept on my couch, like, last week, he was here. I got people in the comments. Well, not interested. All right, game number 3. Hikaru Nakamura, the most controversial player in the Meltwater finals, stalling out against Magnus. Apparently that happened. I saw that somewhere on Reddit. Reddit literally created a separate thread today, Reddit Chess, to dissect the behavior of Hikaru Nakamura. Talk about obsession. Jesus Christ. And all other prophets. I think that's the right word. I don't know what those people do on a daily basis. Employment clearly not I don't know. Anyway, apparently Hikaru's, like, done some stuff that made people mad, like making a lot of draws and stalling. I'm playing 2 events at once. Like, I mean, the format makes no sense. Yeah. Anyway, I love watching it. I love the drama. And Shakhriyar Mamedyarov, who comes to fight every single time. I'm actually taking you directly to their final game. That's because Hikaru and Mamedyarov played a lot of decisive games. They went to an Armageddon, so it's 3-3 after Blitz and Rapid. And Hikaru plays knight f3, d5, e3, which is a very sneaky way to move over your opponent to play c4, b3, without actually playing the move d4. It's a very tricky line. I lost to a Russian 25-50 in the Czech Republic in 2019. It was a 90-minute game. I spent about 80 of my minutes, and he spent about 5. He just played every move in like 10 seconds. Like, he would come back, make a move, and leave. And he just beat me. It was very depressing. Knight f6, c4, c5. c5 is interesting. It's a very big commitment, and there's no e6 played. And CD5, this is supposed to be better for white, like slightly, like ever so slightly. So we have knight c3, black plays knight c6. Here, I personally really like to play bishop to b5. Hikaru plays d4. Yeah, I like this. I like the pin. There's always knight e5 stuff. There's queen a4 stuff. I've played like this before. E6, knight e5 is a way I like to play. And then sometimes you can just take the bishop. You just get the bishop pair. Or you get this and you damage their structure. So that's the way I like to do it. But d4 is very normal. E6. And now we have kind of a weird, we might get an isolated pawn position if cd4 happens, but if dc5 happens, we're going to have a totally symmetrical structure. So bishop e7, castles, castles, and queen e2 with the intention to play the move rook d1. Very common in these positions. Black plays b6. Good rule of thumb is that if they ever play the move b6 like this, you can take on d5. This structure, I believe, is slightly advantageous for white sometimes. And there's also ways you can transform the position into what's known as the hanging pawn structure. So double bishops lined up on the king, rook c1, rook d1, and just visually it looks very nice for white to play this position. Although, dynamically speaking, it's completely equal. So, e takes d5, Hikaru goes for that, and by the way, bishop c5 here is borderline losing positionally. I mean, it's just really not good. b3, bishop b2, and you control the square in front of the isolated pawn. You stack your rooks just like in the other situation, but this time you're also threatening all sorts of double bishop sacrifices. So anyway, enough from me. You notice that Mamedyarov doesn't go to b7. He wants to keep his center solid. Here, 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 knight b4. So, generally speaking, particularly in Armageddon games, the quality of play is lower because the players are a bit more jumpy and nervy. So going for like a solid structure with easy play, which is what Hikaru does, is a good way to go. Now, Mamedyarov is down a minute because it's Armageddon, but if he makes a draw, he wins the game. He's trying to complicate things. So he plays knight b4, looking to potentially get to this bishop. Knight e1 is an interesting move. Queen e7, and now rook c1. White kind of got everything and is ready to bring the bishop back and then start launching cannons at the center. Rook c8, bishop b1. All planned. Now's a big question. What the hell do you do? Mamedyarov takes, and plays g6. I don't really get it. I don't really understand this. He blocks the bishop, but he also has a lot of dark square weaknesses. But okay, a3. Kick the knight out, knight d3. Now c5 is a problem. c5 is a big problem. So what do you do with it? Shove it forward, obviously. Knight f4, takes. Isolated pawn. There we go. Now the two pawns are one pawn, and I'm going to get that d5 pawn. Pretty good positional game here. How do you play if you have a very weak isolated pawn? You play dynamically. You play around the pawn because there's more empty space. Knight to a5 attacks the queen. Hikaru gets this queen off the board and shoves the pawn forward. But black is still defending. Still defending, and it's not so easy to just take the bishop and say, I have a bishop now, because now black doesn't have any isolated pawn. Knight e2, rook c1, rook c1, rook c8, bam, bam. And Hikaru must have been like, well, I mean, he's like a lot down on the clock, so I can play this endgame for a while and he might run out of time, which is completely accurate, by the way. That's exactly what you should do, because there's not, I don't know if there's bonus time in the event. It might be after like move 50, or it doesn't exist. All right, time for the king run. And black's king is just getting closer to the center. So black is winning. This is a winning endgame for black. White's pawn is overextended. That pawn might be good in middle games. It's not good in end games. And actually g6 was brilliant because now that bishop is biting on granite and this knight sucks too. So h4, h5. White like doesn't know what to do. Mamedyarov says, all right, well, I got your b pawn now and I have a passed a pawn. So here we go. Knight f4, bishop d7, king c3, a5, knight e2, bishop b5. And yeah, I mean, black is just pushing forward. There is nothing to be done here. This is coming and you're going to be losing the bishop. Unless g takes h5, gh5, and the bishop comes around this way. When you are losing very easy to play positions, create chaos. That might either mean punching your opponent in the face, which I don't condone, or just making really aggressive, belligerent moves that have random tactical things tied to them. a3, bishop g8, a2, king b2. Now knight d3 check here. And black's like, what do I do? I mean, like, I can't get this king out. There's no way to get the king out. And this is about, and now black panics. You see, Mamedyarov should go here. And if f4, he should go here and win this pawn and win this knight and then go here. But he panics. Not a lot of time in Armageddon. He's like, I went here. I got to keep going forward. That threatens nothing. There's no threat with that move. That doesn't threaten anything. So here, now he's like, oh, crap. If I go here, I mean, he can just guard both. Or he can take this. Oh, my God. King b4. King c3. There's nothing. There's still no check. There's no check. So now Hikaru's like, wait a minute. Am I winning? I could just push my pawn. And he's just gonna queen. And he wins. Craziness. I mean, Armageddon is total pandemonium. I mean, just some total insanity. And you know what else was insanity? How awesome the Gotham Gambit's course for white is, by the way. Nice callback to that plug. The final game of this damn video is gonna be sick. Hey, did you click the damn timestamp even after I said that puppies will be kicked if you do? That is so messed up. How dare you? You know, PETA's gonna be in the comment section. No one knows what PETA is unless they're from the United States, the Animal Protection Agency, which has a weird, like, negative connotation around it for some reason. I don't know. Anyway, Sicilian defense, blitz game, Anish, Giri, Magnus Carlsen. Rossalimo, designed to be a close Sicilian where white takes on c6 and then does their thing. There is this line here with e6 knight e7, where white is going to take back with the knight. However, normally when you play bishop b5, you do not play d4. In this case, though, because black's setup is so odd and both the bishops are blocked, it's going to take black longer to get developed. I mean, you can take, but you haven't succeeded in damaging the pawn structure. So to not damage their own pawn structure, black needs to play slower. So white can play faster with d4. Take, queen b6. And here, Anish lines up a bullet at this queen, right? If you take on d4 in this position, then this just leads to this. But if a4, this is very tricky, because now black's real only way to protect this is with the pawn. Apparently, knight c6 is not good, because if takes, and then, for example, if dc6, like, white is clearly better here. It's going to be very difficult to develop. So, a4, right? Magnus is probably like, well, if this, then this, yeah? Huh, that doesn't seem very good, but I don't really know what else to do, so let me sacrifice my queen. So now Magnus has two bishops and a knight for a queen. 9 is 9. That's 9 equals 9. Here, white has a computer line which both players missed. Obviously, you can't take this because you're going to lose your rook, so naturally you want to develop your knight, which is exactly what he does. Queen d3 attacks this like this, and here's the problem if you play, like, for example, knight back to c7. Knight to a3 with the idea to go knight to c4. That's the problem, is that that route of the knight is way too dangerous. And knight d2 to try to go here isn't as good, right? There's d5. You say, well, what's the difference, Levy? What's the difference? The difference is that this version, this knight is more loose, and this knight can also go to c4 in some positions, whereas on d2, it's just a little bit too passive. So the combination of b5 and c4 is really good for this knight, and just throwing it there, by the way, is just like a good way to go. And now this rook trade with rook a8 coming is really strong. So, all that aside, knight to d2 was played, and now it's like, if you're Magnus, you're like, I just sacked my queen for 3 pieces. This is so cool. And if you're Anish, you're like, this dude just sacked his queen for 3 pieces. What the hell is going on? I have to win now. What is he doing? So e5, now knight f5. The knight is now nicely planted. Anish plays knight e4, looking for knight to d6. Knight c6. Now, here, white can do the following. White can attack the knight and then play something like f4. So get a big fat, glob of pawns here. I'm not weight shaming the pawns. Please don't cancel me. Bishop c5, for example, can just be met with king h1, although you also can trade. But the more you trade, it's going to actually be a lot harder to win in the endgame. It's going to be really tough because black is going to have just simply more pieces in a very solid position. So knight h4, f4, h5. So this is what happens. Magnus is like, hello, I don't need to castle. I'm going to attack you with my other flank pawn now, h5. Very tough decision. Probably the engine would say this. Engines really like to just take these flank pawns and just give you the middle finger, like what you thought there was a problem with this move. But he's human, so he does this. The problem is that now the H file is just open. There's no threat yet, but now we have D5, which allows en passant but blocks the queen, and now we have, I'm gonna give you like 7 guesses to guess black's move here, what Magnus plays. Go ahead, you can guess. I'm gonna take a sip of my water. Did any of you guess rook to a5? I certainly hope not, because that move is absolute nonsense. And yet Magnus plays it because he wants to play rook d5. Now, or just in general, maybe get the rook over there in the future at some point. Now, yeah, he played rook a5. I'm not joking. We've had mate in one. We've had everything here. So if a guy wants to put his rook on d5, what do? Stop it. c4, obviously. However, Engine really likes knight to c3. He thinks rook a5 is a borderline blunder because knight's a losing blunder because of this. And then you always threaten and you cut off the rook. But Anish liked his knight in the middle, so instead he plays the move c4. And now Magnus continues just the pawn avalanche to the 5th rank. It's like f5. Vamos, vamos, vamos. And if you take on f5, well, maybe the idea of putting the rook there is going to be justified. Because now the rook has arrived. Hi! Rook a5, rook f5. There's kids watching, but I don't really care. I'm Magnus Carlsen. So b4. This is just a competition of who can get their pawns to the center rank faster. Center is, yeah, right? But you're like, wait a minute, knight b4. And here Anish goes all in. He's like, all his knights and rooks are scattered. d7, I'm going for your head. But when Ortega said that, it really didn't work. Bishop d7, check, boom, boom. All right, now we can feel good about ourselves. Rook e1, rook d1, bam, it's over. But it's not, because Magnus has one move that holds, knight c6. Yep, knight c6, rook d1, and the cold shower. If a piece is under attack, just move it. Just move it. And next we will get rook a8 and knight b8. And this knight will come home to g8. All the pieces will go back. There's no threats. There's no threats. You have no more threats. If you play rook e1 to take on e6, knight f3, and you lose your rook. So Anish is like, all right, let's close it up. Let's close it up. Let's suture it. All right. Now Magnus is like, now two backwards moves. Two backwards moves. Look at the position. Look around you. You have just gone full force ahead, and you've done nothing to me. And that's why I always make him Thanos in all my thumbnails. Because now he's going to play king f7, and now he's going to rotate that knight back to guard his king. And Anish is still like trying to go forward. He trades rooks. His queen's looking nice. Everything in black's position is protected. Everything, except b6, but this pawn's ugly. Nobody cares about it. Rook a4, queen c7. And now Magnus is like, well, time to play this for a win, so I make it in the Gotham video. Takes bishop to e6, and we win this pawn, and we win this pawn. And now, this little stupid orb of pieces is going to move forward toward Anish. Well, first we gotta go back. Now the real question is, what should you trade here? For example, if the rook gets traded for knight and bishop, that's great. If this rook can get traded for two of these pieces, it's great. In fact, rook and knight would probably be the best to leave on the board because the knight is not that mobile, right? But it depends. So what does black do? Black needs to avoid those trades. Now, if you're playing with white here and you do I don't know, if you win a queen for a rook and a bishop, that's also not bad because rook can probably draw versus two knights, but a rook probably cannot draw versus knight and bishop. So just good to keep that in balance in mind. Magnus puts rook e6, rook e4, bishop back, rook g4, and he wins this pawn. And now it's lost. For sure. Because black has the pawns. Now, if it was just pieces, and the king of black could not be guarded, probably it's a draw. Because you can't break through, but you can't really lose. But because black always has pawns, the difference maker here is going to be the pawns. So, the pawns, the pawns, the pawns, the pawns. And here Anish Giri resigned. And so our standings, after 6 rounds of the finals, of the Meltwater finals, I should say, no, this finals, here are the scores. Now, just the score in the final is the left-hand side. Magnus would be tied for first with Timur Radjabov and 3 players with 10 points. But if you add all the bonus point nonsense, Magnus Carlsen has a 7-point lead with 3 rounds to go and 9 points up for grabs. He is basically the champion already, which kind of sucks and is sort of upsetting. And I saw some people defending it in the comments, like the format, because it rewards more participation. But I don't know. I still don't like it. I think the final should be on equal footing. Maybe people who scored better before should get some sort of, prize incentive. I don't know, but like, what is this? What are we even watching? Anyway, you let me know if you want me to cover most of the other rounds, and peace out. You're great. Thanks for hanging out with me for another 35 minutes. I'll see you in the next video or recap. Get out of here.